Welcome back to another amazing, exciting episode. We just want to tell you how incredibly grateful we are to have you here with us today. If this is your first time joining the show, welcome. Just so that you'll know, we drop a new episode every week here, so make sure you subscribe to the channel to get those notifications when a new episode drops.
You know, we had an amazing discussion on the Body Pod podcast this week with female fitness expert Hailey Babcock and Love by Laura's Laura Armstrong. These two ladies have an entertaining podcast that is geared to bringing the most informative information on health, fitness, beauty, and wellness.
Yeah, we had so much fun with them the first time we recorded, and they invited us back on their show to talk about conflict. These gals always keep it real, and they never shy away from asking any of the hard questions.
So in this fast-paced conversation, we talk about avoiding the 8 predictors for divorce, which are all related to our conflict management skills.
Absolutely.
We also talk about the real root cause of conflict. We talk about navigating compromise and a lot more.
You are going to get so much value out of this conversation, whether or not you're married, dating, divorced, or just someone who wants some proven strategies to help you with your relationship.
Now, without further ado, let's get into this conversation, mastering conflict from divorce predictors to win-win compromises, and we'll see you on the other side.
Welcome back to the Body Pod, everyone. We have Master Your Marriage back on today. So we did an episode with them a few months ago, and I think they were actually our first podcast guest, which is so fun.
I know.
They got to go through all of the trial and errors with us because they were legit our first podcast guest. So we are thrilled to have Robert and Sharla back on the show. So welcome, you two.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
So much fun. You guys are so much fun. We were just already laughing, just having a good time just when we were setting up. We're excited to be here.
Yes. Well, I'm so excited too, because I feel like this time in our lives with, as I discussed, I think last time with the age group that I work with, I think we're all just hanging on a lot of times to either our marriages, our relationships with friends, relationships with children, work relationships. I mean, there's so much going on. I don't know a single person that just has time to kick it and just doesn't have a care in the world. And I'm sure they're out there, but I don't know any.
Yeah. If you meet somebody, I'd like to meet them if you know someone.
Yes.
I need some of that. Yeah.
Exactly. So today we are going to talk about a wide range of relationship issues, but mainly centering the conversation around conflict and conflict resolution. So I think that first of all, I want to ask you, what are the biggest issues that you see from the couples that come in either individually or together in therapy? Like what are the common issues that a lot of us are having?
Yeah. So I love how you started out talking about how none of us have no care in the world. And the thing with conflict is that it really does apply. So whether someone is listening today and they're in a committed relationship, or they've been in a committed relationship and it didn't go well and they'd like to try again, or whether they're just looking at how to improve their relationship with their kids or their friendships, I think this topic of conflict applies to every single one of us, unless you live in a cave and you only fight with yourself. Like, I think this applies to every single one of us.
That would be bad if you lived in a cave and you fought with yourself.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. I don't know how else to say it.
Like, always said it's never bad.
So, we if we work with other people and we spend time with other people, we're going to come up against conflict. And when it's our significant other, this person who we're in this emotionally committed relationship with, our most important person to us in the world, they have a way of reflecting back to us every little thing within ourselves that needs to still develop, needs a little bit of work, the places where we're still immature, the places where we're underdeveloped. Nobody else on the planet seems to be able to trigger us the way that our partner has the ability to trigger us. So even though these skills help every relationship, they I mean, even your kids, right? I say he's done challenging me, that's when the kids take over, the teenagers and the early adults. That's when they take over, and they are the ones that get to trigger me. So,
Yes.
as far as I think what I see in coaching clients a lot is, everybody has conflict, and sometimes that conflict is related to parenting. A lot of it has to do with parenting. I just did a couple calls yesterday that were related to, this is how I think we should parent the kids. This is how I think we should parent the kids. And I think one of the big problems that you see with most couples is they think that conflict means there's a problem in the relationship, that just because we're having conflict means something is broken. But it really means your relationship's doing exactly what it's meant to do, which is to grow you up, to reflect back to you these areas where we can still become better, where we can grow.
Yeah, we like to say about conflict in general. So one of my favorite sayings is how you disagree or how you have conflict is how your relationship goes. So if you bring knives and swords and bricks to conflict, then you're going to have a bloody, beat up battle. If you bring feather pillows, maybe it's not going to be so bad. So the answer is can we manage conflict instead of try to solve conflict? So sometimes we talk about conflict resolution, but it's really about conflict management, because it's not about when we're going to have conflict, not if, it's when. Like, everyone's going to have it. It's going to come in different varying degrees. That's because we're all different people, and we didn't marry ourselves, right? Isn't Seinfeld did the episode on that?
That would be worse,
Yeah.
actually.
Yeah.
So true.
So you married or you're committed to this other person because you love what they bring to you, that you love the strengths that you perceive that they have. And so you want that. And yet we're so surprised that they don't agree with us on everything. Like, I can't understand why you don't think the way I think. Look, I chose you because you're different and you have some strengths, and there's something innately in you that is attractive to me. And so we're going to have disagreements. Just how do we manage this conflict in our relationships and manage it appropriately so that we learn something from it, we gain some perspective, and we stop bringing big rocks and everything to the fight.
I like the perspective that it's almost like you bring a culture to the relationship, your spouse brings a culture to the relationship. And so we actually end up blending these two totally different cultures into creating this unique culture together as a team. And I think that's a good perspective to keep in mind, that we are different people with different backgrounds, experiences, traumas, parenting styles that we've grown up with, different past relationships that we've been in. So we're going to create a blended culture together.
Well, that's what's so hard. I feel like when you come from, just my example, from my marriage, my husband's family, like, he hardly ever, if ever, saw his parents argue. And then mine was like dysfunctional chaos. So when I come into, like, I'm always guns a-blazing right at the first, and I've had to step back because that never works well for anyone. You think I would learn my lesson, but these patterns are really hard to break when we've grown up with them, and it's just like natural.
Yeah,
To fight
it's
that
so
way.
true. It's so true. I can't remember the statistic. I just read it recently in an article, but I think the brain needs to like 400 repetitions in order to create like new neural pathways, new habits. But there are some cheat codes on that if you can do it with play and laughter and joy, then you can actually build those pathways faster. So they are very ingrained, but there's some strategies and ways that we can develop new methods. And I think part of it is just understanding, first of all, what it is that we're doing wrong. Like, what are we actually, because we all grew up with a certain way. Mine was chaos as well. Robert's was pretty much chaos as well. So we came out with, both of us, with knives and swords drawn, and we didn't know that wasn't normal. Like, isn't this how everyone does it? And we didn't, realize until we, broke trust and hurt each other a lot, that there was actually another way.
Mm-hmm.
That's something
Yes, I
that you
love that.
guys talked about last time. Was you said that 69% of conflict in relationships is perpetual. And it got me thinking, because we just did a podcast on habit. And that was something I wanted to ask you, that one, is there something that you guys tell your clients or, tools to use to really try to break that pattern? And do you think sometimes, just almost to what Hailey said, is it a habit? Does how we fight, or the certain fights that always come up, like we always fight about X, is it sometimes often just becoming a habit?
Yeah, for sure. I think there's how we fight. It has a lot to do with our primary family that we were raised in growing up. So we learned from habit that this was what was normal. And until we know what is functional and what is dysfunctional, until we learn sometimes through trial and error and making a lot of mistakes, or maybe getting coaching early. Oh my gosh, if couples would just do that before they even got married and got into the big mess, that's when we learn, oh, maybe the way that I grew up was actually dysfunctional and I thought that was totally normal. So I think out of habit, absolutely. What would you add to that?
No, I mean, I think that, we all have our defaults, right? Remember those things that you said when you were newlyweds, you're like, I am not going to do that the way that my parents did that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And then it hits the fan and you say something and you're like, that's exactly the way my mom or dad did it. Right.
Yep.
And you're just like, holy cow. It's because, we just have this ingrained system, and you're absolutely right. And part of it is a habit, and part of it is learning sort of the new tools that
We
you
don't know
need.
what we don't know.
Yeah, you don't know, and you just assume it's normal, and
Yeah.
and while we both came from dysfunctional relationships, hers was a different type of a sword or knife than mine was, right? And so we just spent time,
Mhm.
hurting each other's feelings, and until we tried to figure some things out, and that's, that was almost the beginning phase for why we wanted to start our podcast, was to give people an opportunity just to get some tools, right?
For
Like,
free.
for free. Yeah. Like
Yeah.
just listen, and we'll share some stuff, and we try to do that. And that's why we love doing podcasts where people can ask us questions, because it's different than
Mhm.
the other types of things. But there is a specific set of tools that we're happy to cover.
But I think if you think of it, I think innately how people are is that we want to live our life in a way that is compassionately. And we get a lot of pleasure and joy from actually helping one another. I mean, you're in a business where you help other women and it feels good. Even though it's a business, you do things that help other women to feel really good about themselves and to build their confidence. And so I think that we are innately driven to want to help one another to succeed and to get more out of life and to help each other to make life more wonderful. And when we get into these relationships, what we don't realize is there's certain patterns in the way that we communicate, the way that we think, the way that we behave, that actually that make it really difficult for the other person to continue wanting to help us get our needs met and to have a wonderful life. Like if we could stay out of these danger zones, we actually innately want to help each other to have a better life. That's how we're programmed to really be. But we get into these patterns that we're ingrained in us, probably from young age, that make it hard for the other person to actually have that desire. So it destroys goodwill. It destroys them like jumping in and wanting to help us get our needs met. So if we can just learn how to stay out of those red flag zones, like we can actually help each other be a team, be a collaboration, and help each other to have a more wonderful life.
I wish that there's certain non-negotiables that I wish that everyone just could have in their life. And one of them would be, take some of your money and spend it on some kind of therapy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Just like you would go to the doctors, or like for me, I'm like, you got to spend some money on taking care of yourself and the gym, or, whatever. But it's like, we don't know anything, and we just get into these relationships and it's a whirlwind. I mean, I think I know maybe 2 marriages that have just been pretty like easy breezy, never had issues. But it's like the minority. I mean, the majority of us are like, it's work. It's hard
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
to really get to those good places.
And you hire coaches or anything else, right? To lose weight, or you have an issue with your body health, you hired, you go to a doctor. But we don't take the time or energy to navigate our relationships and learn how to better it. I really wish it was required
Yes.
in life.
Well, and the sad part about that is most people end up with 6 years worth of misery before they actually really try to get help.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the sad part, right? And as you talk about those couples, just one or two, we know one couple who has this enduring love story where both of their sets of parents just
modeled really great stuff for them. And they were one of the only ones I know that actually think marriage has been easy.
Yeah. The only one
literally
of all the
two.
couples we've talked to. Yeah.
Yeah.
The rest of us are just working through it. I think that it's when we talk about, as I think about all the aspects of how to, sort of manage conflict. And I had like an hour and a half conversation with a friend of mine who's having, who's like all of us, trying to navigate those times in his marriage. And he was like, well, is the conflict then solved if you've managed it? Right. The 69%, he just had a question because he'd heard the podcast and he knows my number. So he called me directly. And I'm like, you could solve the problem that you have, that 69%, right, that you brought up. It's never really solved because you're just managing these types of things. And it's interesting that Sharla mentioned that, raising kids is like is one of the more recent thing that we've heard a lot. And oddly enough, that's probably one of our 69% conflicts. Yeah. And it doesn't mean that we've solved it. We've just learned a couple of skills to help manage the conflict so that now when it comes up, we just look at each other and we're like, okay, yep, we're doing this one again. Okay. Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm. Instead of like, you're always doing this thing. Like, I can't believe it. Right. Which would have been us in the past. And now we're just like, oh, yep. All right. You ready? We're going to talk about this dumb one again. Like you see it your way. I see it my way. And understanding that perspective. But now if we can infuse just a little bit of humor and some acceptance into understanding how that problem like why it's important to her. And she spent time understanding why it's important to me. And there's some specific things behind that. But when we get to that, then we can be a little bit more accommodating. We can bring a little bit more humor into the situation. Imagine how much different it is when I say, okay, this one again. Like, we're doing this one again, Sharla? Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're doing this one again. All right. Yeah. Right? And now that's not us being angry. It's just us, saying, okay, well, let's see why it's important and figure it out.
So the thing with the 69% is that this comes from the John Gottman research, which was 50 years of research on couples, bringing couples back in every 3 years, see who stayed together, who didn't, who ended up divorced, and what were the similarities between the masters versus the disasters. And he found that these couples were coming back aging, 3 years older, 3 years older, 3 years older, wearing different outfits, and they're older and they have different hairstyles, but they're fighting about the same darn things year after year after year. Even the masters were doing the same thing. So it's not unusual. It doesn't mean that your marriage is doomed. It's actually very normal and natural because, again, like we said earlier, we're different people. What he did find, though, was that, as Robert said, how you do conflict is how your relationship goes. So he looked at what are the predictors for divorce, and he found 8 predictors for divorce. And every one of those predictors had to do with how the couple does conflict, how they manage conflict. So while conflict will predict whether a relationship will make it or not make it, and he could predict with 94% certainty whether a couple would stay together just after watching how they argued for 15 minutes.
What?
I mean, imagine that. He would have them go, okay, pick any topic of major conflict and try to solve it in the next 15 minutes, which was a trick question to begin with because you're not going to solve it. And he would watch them for 15 minutes and predict with 94% certainty, accuracy, whether they'd stay together or not. And he was spot on.
Well, what were the predictions?
Yeah, I will.
We all want to know what those are.
So like I said a few minutes ago,
get your pen out. Here we go.
It really has to do with there's certain things we just don't want to do because it's going to make it really difficult for the other person to like us, respect us, want to help us, to collaborate with us. And so these things are the big, big red flags that we want to stay away from. So first of all, was something called the 4 horsemen of, he named it the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. So we want to make sure we're staying away from all types of criticism, blame, like with criticism, right? We're throwing in all that blaming language and insults usually. So criticism is one. Another is contempt.
Your favorite?
And it is my favorite because I was the master of it for many years.
I love it.
So contempt is when it sounds a lot like a criticism, but it comes across with
I'm
like
so much better than
like
you.
a superiority. Like, how are you so stupid? Are we really talking? Are you an idiot? Like, it comes through where I'm so much better, so much smarter, so much tidier than you. And you're this lowly little person who just is so stupid that you don't know anything. Like, even though we may not use those words, that's the energy of it. So even if it's just the way we the tonality of our voice, or the eye rolls, or the little left lip raise that we do in the corner. I was really good at that one. And the snickering.
I'm guilty of all these.
I know. I know.
No, it's like the condescending energy, right?
It's the energy that because only 7% of what we actually communicate is our words. The rest of it is our tonality and also our body language. So we can put so much contempt out there without saying anything. And then what are the other two?
The next one would be defensiveness, which was I was really good at that one.
Oh, that's me.
Me too.
Yeah, and defensiveness is this, and so there's a couple different versions of defensiveness. One is the like, why are you always picking on me? It's not my fault. Like, I don't understand. I can't ever do anything right.
The innocent victim.
So that I'm innocent. And the other one is like, you hit me with and he uses this example, like a 20-pound cannonball. And so I take a 40-pound cannonball and I hit you back with it. Like, oh, really? Bam. Right. So that's defensiveness. And then the last one tends to be more of so the first two, contempt and criticism, tend to be, and I know it's broad strokes here, women tend to use those because they're words based more than guys. Guys tend to use defensiveness in between, 50-50, a little more on the guy side. And then the last one, which is called stonewalling, which is the one that guys use the most. It tends to be more men than women. It's not exclusive to that, but stonewalling is when while you're talking. So Sharla, let's just, I'll use an example for Sharla, and she's mad about something, and I'm just like tuning her out. I'm present, but not present. I'm like, man, is she going to have a heart attack? Look at the vein on her forehead. I'm thinking, yeah, honey. Oh, I understand. Oh boy, she better stop. That girl's just going to go off the rails. Like, I hope she doesn't have, hope this is like exercise for her. I think she's getting 140 beats a minute, right? So we're stonewalling. We're not giving anything back to the conversation, and we're blank. And so I tell couples sometimes, like, if you're having a disagreement and you feel like you're not connecting with the other person, yep, stonewall, walls went up.
Yeah.
So those are the 4 horsemen. That's just one.
So those are predictors for divorce.
Yeah.
And then you can look at and measure what they would do when they were watching these couples for 15 minutes was tracking how much positivity versus negativity was in this conflict conversation. So believe it or not, you can actually have conflict where it's positive. Where there can be laughter, where there can be like, I go get you a glass of water, even though we're having a difficult conversation and we're debating something. I can still go grab you a cup of tea, a glass of water, and hand it to you and do something nice for you in the middle of this difficult conversation. I can still be warm. I can still be compassionate. And so they would measure how much positivity to negativity. Obviously, we just talked about some examples of negativity. And then what was the ratio just in that 15 minutes? And the couples that stayed together had a positivity to negativity ratio of 5-1, 5 positive to 1 negative. The disasters, the ones that got divorced, they had a 0.8 positivity to 1. So less positivity than negativity, and way, way, way more negativity than those who ended up staying married. So just overall, you want to start to think about, how can I make this conflict discussion overall more positive? Take out the accusations, the blame, the criticisms, the insults, the sneering, the eye rolling, the defensiveness. How can we turn this into a more positive conversation?
And it's hard for people to understand until we have this conversation. So we say, what we want positive conflict. Right?
That seems like an oxymoron, right?
It does, right? Because you think, like, how can that build us up? But if there's something to learn, if you can grab more insight from your partner, if you can learn how to be respectful, if you can, drop your swords and be really vulnerable and here's the hard part for guys to hear, right? Vulnerability equals intimacy. And you have to be able to let yourself be known and seen. And we have our walls up most of the time. And so we don't let that happen. But so one more.
Yeah. So those are the big ones.
Yeah,
and then
big ones,
there's another one that we look at, which has to do with the stonewalling that Robert mentioned. And that's something called flooding.
Yep.
So chronic flooding, when they would see, because when they had these couples doing these conflict conversations for 15 minutes, he was measuring all of their body. They was looking at like heart rate and hormones and how much they moved around, body language. They were measuring all these metrics. And so they started realizing, okay, when people's heart rate hits 100 beats per minute, if you're a normal person, if you're athletic like you, Hailey, maybe it's like 20 above your baseline, right? So maybe for you, it's a little lower than 100. But roughly for normal people, around 100 beats a minute was the moment they started to stonewall, when they would just go blank, when they would check out. Like, what is going on? So they already had found this link between flooding, which is when your heart rate reaches 100 beats a minute. They found this correlation between flooding and divorce. So chronic flooding is when you're constantly going into these arguments with your partner, your heart rate reaches 100 beats per minute, and stonewalling would happen. So what's happening at that point is adrenaline starts to get pushed out and cortisol. And when those two things happen, we become very ineffective at having any sort of conflict discussion at all. Why is that, Robert?
Well, I mean, you've heard the fight or flight, or now they used to call it fight or flight. Now they call it fight, flight, or freeze. And that's just our inability to make decisions. So one of the things that has been that we as in, not me, but in the training for armed forces, special tactics, police officers, things like that, is we have to train these individuals to learn how to perform under stress, right? And so I'm bringing this back because the rest of us aren't trained to know how to do this. And despite the fact that all of the things during fight, flight, or freeze, flight, freeze, wow, I might need more caffeine, fight, flight, or freeze, that happens. So we have pupil dilation or vasoconstriction of the extremities, like all these things. Heart rate elevates, respiration comes up. We're starting to convert, different systems to this fighting machine or this running machine, right? And so now we're ready to fight, and that's not helpful in a relationship to be ready to fight. But one of the things that happens is this thing called auditory exclusion. And auditory exclusion comes to the fact where we actually can't hear as well as we used to be able to before we became flooded. And that's also sort of this factor of we just need to run. So the body's just closing down the things that aren't important and doing this other thing. And so you start getting into this flooding situation. You start raising your voice because you can't hear. You can't hear and you can't take in new information, even if your partner is giving you a valid point, and your partner starts to raise their voice and they can't hear either. So neither one of you, you suck at being a listener, so you can't communicate. And the only thing you do is raising your voice and then repeating yourself because you think, I can't understand why they don't understand me, so I'll say it again, right?
Oh, I'm a master at that.
Yeah, so talk about a recipe for disaster, right? And so in my experience growing up, right? So my mom's married 4 times. So the only thing I saw was people leaving after fights. So I thought that I was doing my marriage a favor by staying in the fight. Like she's like, we should take a break. I'm like, no, we are going to solve this problem. I don't know why I heard, let's take a break, right? But so I would just stay in there, and I would try to fight like I'm fighting for my relationship. I thought that's what I was doing. And instead, I needed to learn how to, take a break and work on some self-soothing, right?
Mm-hmm.
In order to bring my heart rate down to become human again. Like if you can't hear and the only thing you do is raising your voice and there's no solution, there's a high likelihood that you're about to hurt each other's feelings and say something that you can't take back.
So do you think it's good to take a beat and look away
Absolutely.
like, okay, this is going nowhere.
Yes. This is actually so important. It's we teach couples 6 key skill sets that they need for conflict that needs to be in everyone's toolbox.
Yeah.
And the first one is how to know when you're flooded, okay? So that you can call a break and go self-soothe. So self-soothing is like the first skill set that we teach couples. So we teach them, okay, actually we have
Yeah, I was
heart rate
looking for it. I don't
monitors.
see
It's
it.
usually one sitting on my desk. I don't
Yeah.
see it, but we have heart rate monitors. And in our retreats, we'll have couples wear heart rate monitors when they have conversations. And what's so fascinating is
Yeah.
people have no idea that their heart rates are elevated. They think they're still at 80 beats a minute and they're 120.
And in the studies, so we do pulse oximeters, so everybody wears one, so the numbers are really big. And the best part is your partner calls you out. You're like, "Oh, you're flooded." And you're like, "Oh, yeah, me too."
Mm-hmm,
But
mm-hmm.
In the studies, they'd ask these people. They didn't, I think they had to wear them like a polar heart rate monitor strap so that they could monitor their heart rate independent. And they said, "Okay, you're flooded. You need to take a break." And they would take a break. And then, "Okay, so tell me when you think that you're back to normal." This is sort of a measure of how good we are at knowing what our heart rate is, right? Yeah, they all missed. They're like, "Oh, I'm back." And they're like, "Nope, you're 130.
Yeah.
Crap.
Go chillax some more.
Go take a real break.
And it takes time. It takes a minimum of 30 minutes for your adrenaline and your cortisol to start to metabolize. So if you're flooded and you think a 5-minute break around the house is going to cut it, that's not going to cut it. You have to let those stress hormones metabolize. So yeah, the first skill set we teach all couples is this is what flooding looks like. Absolutely, we need to have a signal for taking a break, whether it's one or both of you that needs it, we're going to honor it. And with that, we also have an agreement in place ahead of time that if someone calls for a break, we don't push, we honor that break. And we also agree to how long of a break that we need and that we will come back, because like Robert talked about abandonment, it can feel very abandoning to leave a conversation and then, because we are conflict avoidant, not want to come back to that conversation, leaving a person feeling dismissed, rejected, abandoned. And so we don't want to do that. We want to say, okay, like give me 1 hour or give me 2 hours. I would say anywhere between 30 minutes and 24 hours is great. I wouldn't let it go longer than that, because then someone starts to feel rejected. But, let's give me an hour. And if at that hour mark you still feel flooded, then say, I need another hour. And we are huge proponents of adult timeouts. Very important, because what happens at that 100 beats per minute is only going to be destructive to your relationship. Nothing good is going to happen.
Yeah, that's the hard part, really. And as we teach this in the courses, we always tell people, like, you just, come up with a code word or a sign or something. And I will tell you that just even having that code word has headed off, has diverted so many disagreements between us. And ours is, that was a little sharp.
Well, that's when it's escalating.
Yeah, when it's escalating, it'll be like, that's a little sharp. Like,
and then that's when we can still do like repair before it gets to 100 beats a minute. But
yeah, you just say a word, say a timeout word, or let's
use,
take a break.
like a referee timeout,
whatever
or
it is.
whatever.
And when you agree on that.
My husband and I say carrot. We just came up with a random word 5 years ago. And I think we were eating like a veggie tray. And I was like, it just needs to be something neutral. And I was like, okay, carrot. And so even now, if we get into it, one of us will say carrot, which means, okay, we're going to stop.
That's so perfect.
I love it.
Yeah, it has been. And when we've gotten in a text argument before, one of us will just shoot the carrot emoji. This isn't going anywhere. So we're
I love that. I love the carrot emoji.
Yeah, then maybe we'll steal that. I love that.
Yeah, that's so perfect. Awesome.
Yeah, because it kind of is nice to just have a neutral, whatever.
Yeah.
So we love timeouts, right?
And here's the thing about the timeouts, though, is that there is a way to do them right, and a way that, you can mess up anything. There's a way to there's a way to blow it for just about every one of these skills. And the way you blow it with a break is that you go in the other room and you start to think about your comeback. Dirty, rotten son of a blah, blah, blah. I'm going to let him know that this is what is right, and this is what I'm going to do, and this is how we're going to do things.
And I should have said this, and I can't believe that. And I'm going to come back. So it's not the time to strengthen your argument. That's not what it's about. No. It's not about writing down how to get the test questions right so that the next time you're there. It's really about, they recommend read a book or listen to music or just do something.
Exercise.
They'll completely disconnect you from where you're at. Exercise I love, because you've already got the adrenaline and everything.
Yeah, cortisol's already high.
You've already got
Yeah.
it there, man. You'll pedal away, like get on the exercise bike.
He'll usually go on the bike.
I usually go down to the Peloton and start
I'll
to ride.
usually do like breathing. That's for me, my go-to is I'll do heart-focused breathing or box breathing or some kind of breathing because that activates the vagus nerve. So there's a lot of ways we can activate that vagus nerve. That singing will do that, yawning will do that, sighing will do that, a lot of breath work will do that. And once the vagus nerve kicks in, that will start to override and calm down that stress response.
Yeah.
This is why you never send like an email for talking about like work relationships when you're angry. Cause there have been some times where I'm like, I could destroy this.
Yes. You are like a warrior.
Yeah. And then like a couple days later, I was like, well, I mean, like what good would that have done or, whatever. But man, I mean, the pause is the adult timeout. I love it. What's number 2?
I know, I love that too.
So another tool that we teach to put in the toolbox is how to start conversations. So
if you come in hot, that's how it's going to go.
Yeah. So the data actually shows something really interesting. So the first 3 minutes of a conversation, just 3 minutes, will predict how that conversation is going to go. I think it's even less than 3 minutes.
Yeah. I think it even predicts how it ends.
How it's going to predict how that whole entire conversation is going to go, which isn't surprising, but it also predicts the longevity of the relationship. So in that first 2 or 3 minutes, that first 30 seconds, how you start that conversation is going to determine not only whether that's going to be a positive interaction, but it's also going to determine whether you're going to stay together in this relationship. So think about that every time you have feedback, because, hey, we all have feedback and it's okay. Like we shouldn't be conflict avoidant. We're never going to suggest that we should avoid problems or be a people pleaser or not talk about things. Like we have feedback to give our partner, our spouse, right? But there's a way to do it right and there's a way to blow it. And so if we can come in gently to that conversation, it's going to increase the health of the relationship and increase the likelihood that that's going to have a positive ending. 80% of the time, women, we are the ones that bring these conversations up. That's just
the guns a-blazing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'm A+ in it.
I know. 80% of the time, we're the ones that have the feedback. It's like, I need to talk to you about this thing. So it's really important. And 96% of the time, how we start that conversation determines how that conversation is going to go. So for us, one of the things we can get better at is how to bring up issues. So how do we do it gently? How do we do it softly? For starters, we want to avoid the you word. You is going to start it out harshly from the get-go. So that's one big tip. An easy one to take away is, how can I frame this as an I statement? So how can I describe myself? How can I describe my feelings? How can I describe my needs versus describing you and what a lousy piece of crap you are? Okay. So make it all about me instead of you. So avoid the I statements and avoid the you statements. And then try to, and this is, I think, there's some guru or someone that said this, and I don't remember who it was, but that the ability to just not evaluate and not judge, but just observe something in someone without judgment, without evaluation, is the highest form of intelligence. So this is hard, but how can we describe what's going on without judging our partner, without evaluating a partner, without criticizing our partner and saying what they're doing wrong or giving them some sort of diagnosis like you're such a narcissist, right? How can we just describe it without evaluating it? And that takes practice and intelligence and work, but how can I just tell you what it is with that and do it in a way that's very neutral? And then say what it is that I need and how can I be polite in this and be kind when I do it. So for example, if I would say, I'm feeling, make this about me. Let's say, Robert, I don't know, give me something, throw something at me. Made a mess. It's usually me making a mess, but I'll throw it at you. I don't know.
I came in late or I wasn't nice to Dallin.
Okay.
Try that. Yeah.
All right.
That's again parenting. There we go.
Okay, so let's
Yeah.
say we're having a parenting discussion and I felt like he was a little bit maybe too strict about something. That's usually the conversation. So, if I wanted to bring this up, I could come to him and talk about how I'm feeling about the situation. Hey, I'm feeling a little bit sad. I'm feeling a little bit frustrated and just a little bit sad, just for Dallin, our son. And I noticed when when you guys were talking today that this happened, and not describe him, like not say you were awful, you were mean, you were cruel, you were rude. Like don't give those words, but just describe what I saw and what
Or how you felt.
yeah,
Right?
and how I felt. So I felt
Yeah.
sad and I felt frustrated. And this is what I observed. And, what I'd really love is if we can talk about how we could try doing this. This is what I really need. Is that something that we could work on doing better? So if I can come in gently and softly to bring up a topic instead of coming in with those accusations and blame, insults and evaluations, then it's going to go a lot better.
Because she made it about what she needed and how she felt. And, in these connected relationships, we really just we don't want to hurt their feelings on purpose, and we want to meet their needs. This is really I don't want to say the two things that work, but we want to meet their needs and we want to make sure that they feel well. And so when she approaches it with this is how I feel, like these things, not you're making me feel this way. It's just like I saw this and it's making me feel, right? And this is what clearly saying her needs. I'm like, okay, well, you know what? If that would make you feel better, I could probably try to,
Do a little better on
do
that.
a little better on that. I'll do my best. Do you have any? And then I'm open to, and this is one of the other conflict things, but then I'm open to accepting influence. Like, do you have an idea? Like what would make it better for me, what would you like to see me do? And now I'm opening myself up to accept some input from her, some influence. And am I willing to act on that influence?
So as an example, we had one of our fights once was about who does the snow removal off the snow shoveling off the front walkway, right?
Yeah.
So when we moved from California to Utah, our son was he, like 11, I think.
10, 11, yeah.
Yeah. And so Robert grew up in a snowy area, and he was the one growing up with a single mom most of the time. He had to do it. There was no choice. He was always shoveling the driveway. They couldn't afford snow blowers. So, right. It
Don't
was
need a snow
doing
blower.
it
You
by
got a Robert.
hand. You got a Robert.
Yeah, that's fine.
And so, of course, we moved here. Our 10-year-old Alan was like, it's his job. And I'm like, oh, but his poor little fingers are going to fall off out there. It's so cold. It's so mean to make him do that. So we had this fight about him doing the snow. But what we really needed to do, and this is another one of the tools we can talk about in a minute, was really have this conversation. Start it calmly. So we had to start with this gentle approach. And by the way, here's the thing. When you say, I feel, the next word shouldn't be you.
Yeah, I feel.
It's a big tip.
I'm starting it right. I feel you
like
are an idiot.
You're an idiot.
Yeah,
That's
that doesn't work.
cheating.
Yeah.
That doesn't count.
That's not using poorly.
Yeah.
The actual 3 steps to that, let me back up just a little bit, is I feel, about what, and I need. So those are the 3 steps to start the conversation. I feel. And then when you say about what, make sure you're not evaluating, that you're just describing what you saw, like you're like a newscaster or something, like this is what I noticed. And then this is what I need. And then say thank you and be polite, right? So that's how you bring it up. So we've got our son, and he's doing this, we got the snowblower shoveling fight that's going on. And
Disagreement.
And so what it is when you have 2 people who are arguing about something like even this, what they usually do is they sit there and fight about what time of day the snow shoveling is going to take place, whose responsibility it is, how often it happens. And you're talking about all the who, what, when, where, whys. But
So not even the main issue.
you're not talking about the main issue.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what people are always doing, is they're fighting about the details instead of fighting about the real issue. So what's the real issue?
Well, I mean, as we've talked about it, right? So oftentimes trying to figure out what the problem is to solve, right? To manage this conflict is there's a thing that we call finding the dreams within the conflict, or the important part, this deeply held value that each of us may have. Like, why is it important for me, for Robert, to have Dallin, clear the snow? Well, I was raised with the understanding that hard work is important. It develops character. You have to do things you don't like sometimes. And, you have a responsibility to the house and to the family. Like, we all pitch in. This is what we do. So that's sort of where I come from, right? And so, like, I'm up at 6:30, 6 in the morning, because I'm shoveling snow before I leave to work. And he may not even have to wake up that early, right? So the time consideration, which Sharla was interested in, she's like, well, does it matter if he does it at 9 o'clock or at 6 o'clock with you? I'm like, well, actually, I don't really care when he does it. I just need him to do it, right? And so we were getting hung up on the fact that he wasn't out there with me at 6:37 in the morning shoveling snow, when the only thing I really needed from her point of view and from my point of view is, would he be responsible enough to do it? Fun fact, he actually shovels the snow now without being asked, now that we've actually given him the option, right? I'll come home and the front walk's done. And now it's an opportunity for me to give him praise. I'm like, holy cow, dude, you shoveled the walkway. Great, thanks.
So the real issue, if you can imagine, like Robert and I are both holding our fists up, right? And we're like punching at each other and we're fighting. If you can look at within each person's fist, within that fist is the real issue. It's not the who, what, when, where, why details. It's the values and dreams and things that are so important. Maybe it's ethics, maybe it's beliefs, maybe it's values. But if we'll open up our fists and talk about the real issue, let me see what's in your fist. Let me show you what's in my fist. Then we can almost always find a compromise or a win-win where both of our values are being represented in the solution, even if it's just a temporary solution. Because remember, a lot of these things are situational, and we'll fight about it again next month. But in this situation today, we can open up our fists and find a win-win resolution for this today. So there's a few.
I mean, those will come back up, right? So we'll talk about him mowing the lawn in another couple of months.
I was the lawnmower mowing like 2-acre yards for a neighbor that my dad would sign me up for. I have PTSD about it. When you were saying the snow.
Wow.
Yeah, you probably do. Yeah.
Wow.
That was me at 10.
Yeah. Right. And what was in my fist, right, was more like, okay, how can we do this and give him appreciation?
So he doesn't dread it.
How can we do this? And so that he doesn't dread it. How can we make it so that he enjoys it a little bit, where he's learning, when he's having fun, where he's protected? So the mom in me has these values. So then he opens his fist and says, I want work ethic and character and learn hard things. And I'm like, okay, well, I want fun and play and kindness, respect and appreciation. Can we come up with a solution that incorporates all of that? And we did. And it was not that hard, but we had to talk about the real issues, which were the values behind those things.
Yeah, we fought about it for a year, or disagreed about it for a year.
Yeah, now we don't anymore. And he just does it on his own. But there are some questions that you can ask each other. So you start the conversation gently, like we just demonstrated, but then there's some questions you can ask to help you figure out what's in each other's fist. So a couple of the really good questions you can ask is, do you have any beliefs, core values that are part of your position? Is there a story behind this for you? Is there maybe even like, does this relate somehow to your childhood, your background? And so for me, it was really understanding how Robert, and kind of picturing little Robert and how his story involved shoveling the walkway for his family, and how that, he took care of his single mom and his sister in that way. So that also softened my heart to hear those childhood stories. You can also ask, just again, tell me why this is important to you, or what would be your ideal dream here? Again, what is it you need? So questions are going to help you good questions are going to help you to open up those fists and see what's inside, and then go, okay, how can we come up with something given what you need, what I need, what your values are, what my values are?
I feel like I'm getting a D- in this conversation. I got a lot of work to do.
That's perfect, though, right? I mean,
Hailey, we all mess up.
Yeah.
I mess up.
And we work with couples. We'd love to say we work with young couples. We've done it once or twice, but usually couples that are, their kids are starting to get out of the house, and now they realize they have to like each other, and they don't know what happened.
That was one of my questions. Was it the age group mostly like in our demographic?
That's a big one. That's a big one that we have, couples even that have been married for 30 years and the kids are now gone and they're like, "Who are you? And what are we going to do?" Yeah.
Yeah. And we just start the same place. Like let's talk about having, positive conflict. Let's talk about the way that you enter these conversations. Let's talk about, which tends to be more of a, and I'm going to just segue a bit, but more of a, and I mentioned it before, but more of a guy thing than a girl thing as much, right? But the value of being able to accept influence from your partner, right? Like that is huge. And as guys, we're sort of hardwired and designed to have to be able to figure these things out, right? And then we come home and even though, and I've told this before, like even though I know the decision I'm going to make, whether that's a decision that directly involves Charlotte or not, and it has to do with maybe it's a car decision, snow tires, this snow tire, whatever that is, right? That she could care less about. I still will ask her opinion on it, even if I already know the decision I'm going to make. Like, yep, I'm going to go with the Michelin Rain X or whatever that tire is. There's something with an X. It's a snow tire. I'm going to go with that snow tire and I'm going to have it done here. I'll still run it by her because maybe she'll say something like, "Oh, hey, did you know that the neighbor across the street's got the same car and he's selling these snow tires that are like 6 months old?" Like, oh, right. Had I not asked, had I not spent any time to maybe accept and ask for her opinion and her influence, I might have missed something important. Here's the part what takes a lot of growing up. Am I willing to change my perspective based on my partner's input? That's when it really gets good. Not am I just willing to ask, because that's just easy, right? Let's just ask. But am I willing to say, "Oh, you know what? That's a really good point. I don't know that I considered that, right? Have I considered that? Like, I think I'm willing to consider that, and I'm going to change my perspective based on this accepting influence." And so this is a huge part, and it needs to go both ways, right? If you're in a relationship where neither one of you accepts influence on decisions around the house and with the kids, then I think you're both just single parents
Hmm.
or roommates.
Okay, so I have a big question. What do you do if you have a partner that really cannot take their side of take responsibility for their side of the conflict? So like we just interviewed someone on uh narcissistic relationships, and I know that's probably extreme, but it was so fascinating. I was like diving in. But for someone that is just like, I this person's not even coming to the table. Like they're deflecting, they're projecting, are there times where you're just like, listen, if you don't both come to the table, this is doomed.
Well, and sometimes that is the truth. And sometimes there is a time and a place when walking away is the only option, quite frankly. Um, I hate that. It's not my favorite thing. I think most people, if there's even 1% of you that still wants to try to work together, get help, get a coach, get a therapist, get someone to guide you through these things. I think what often happens that gets us to that point is the fact that we wait so long to actually try to work on our relationship. The average couple waits, like Robert said, 6 years to get help in their relationship. That's 6 years of pain and hurt and resentment and frustration that's piled up. You lose hope. You learn how to live life without your spouse. You go through this distance and isolation cascade that happens in those relationships, where it starts with the 4 horsemen and then the flooding, and then you just disengage and you just stop caring. And that's the hard part when couples come to me and one of them really wants to work on their relationship and the other one's already done. And like one of the first questions I'm asking is like, what are you willing to do to save this relationship? And the answer really should be anything. I'm willing to do whatever it takes. But sometimes the answer is nothing. And that's sad.
In that scenario, does it ever work out? Or, does therapy and stuff like that help in that scenario?
one person can certainly work on their part of things. Like Robert talked about, let's say it's a man who doesn't accept influence at all. And maybe she is extraordinarily resentful because this is the data. 65% of men don't do a very good job at accepting influence. And so she's gotten more critical over the years because when he doesn't accept influence, she becomes more critical. And maybe she gets to the point where she's sort of done. She's just focusing on the kids, the job. I don't care, whatever. You can even just have an affair if you want. I'm done. And that does happen. And so what if he just started accepting influence? What if he started doing those things? Would her heart soften? Maybe. Like all we can do is focus on our part. We can't change someone else. And the interesting thing about getting someone to change, and here's the really hard part, is that nobody ever actually starts to try to change until they first feel loved and accepted for who they already are. That's the paradox. That's the really hard part about this is like, if I feel like you're trying to change me, I'm going to dig in my feet even deeper into the sand and I'm not going to move. So you have to feel loved and accepted before you feel vulnerable enough to step into change.
That is the $1 million answer right there. Oh,
yeah. So can you love and accept, work on yourself, give your partner time to maybe make those shifts? If they don't, they don't. If they do, get some help and start running with that, even if it's 1%.
Is that where safety comes in too? I mean, where does safety come in this? And what do I mean by that? When I first heard somebody say that they didn't feel safe in a relationship, I was like, is he physically abusing you? And they were like, no. That was the only thing that I felt that you would ever say, I don't feel safe in this relationship. I didn't even think about the emotional and.
That's a big thing.
Feeling safe to communicate.
Yeah, it's emotional safety, and it's a big thing. So whenever you can go do some research on like polyvagal theory, and there's some great books out there on this, but basically our nervous systems are always communicating with one another on an unconscious level. This is a primitive ability that our bodies have, that when we're with someone, we are constantly sending out, we're sensing without consciously knowing it, we're sensing and we're picking up signals of safety or we're picking up signals of danger. And when we feel the criticism and we feel these things, it doesn't have to be physical at all. It usually isn't. It's usually the insults, the sneering, the snickering, and the body, not the mind, but the body is saying, I'm not safe here. So emotional safety can be rebuilt with commitment, with trust, by learning about how our nervous systems actually do talk to each other and learning how to, again, self-regulate and co-regulate. Like it's a combination of both. Like when we're together, being able to co-regulate our nervous systems into that space, then we can go out and self-regulate and then come back to be able to co-regulate again. So yes, it's safety is a big part of this, and learning how to regulate our nervous systems is how we get there.
So hard for couples to do sometimes. So hard, especially if they spend a long time not feeling safe. Like one of the first steps that we try to do is, can we get you just to connect and be present with each other without, I don't want to use the word repulsion, but without just feeling just like, oh,
I want to run,
just get away from me. Right. And that's if we can get couples to that point with the hugging exercise. Right?
Yeah. I think I might've told you about that in our last episode. There's an exercise that we give a lot of couples where we just have them hug, and it's a non-sexual hug. There's no touching. It's just like you embrace, but you are standing on your own 2 feet, because the point of the exercise is, can I stabilize myself in your presence? Can I calm my nervous system in your presence?
I would fail that one. I couldn't do the eye test. Remember the look in each other's eyes for 3 minutes. And I was like, I need to jump off a cliff.
Well, you know what? We just went on vacation a few weeks ago and I got mad at him in the line at security. So trust me, we're not perfect either.
Yeah, no,
it happens to all of us. But you know what? Here's one more thing to take away from that, though, is that when we have negative emotions like anger, when I was pissed at him about something he said in the line at security, I bit back, which I shouldn't have done. And then I went, oh, can I grab that back? Can I pull that back in? And then I realized, okay, again, what is anger? So all of our negative emotions are actually teachers. They're instructors. So when we're feeling these negative emotions to our partner, it's important to remember if we're having negative emotions, it means our needs are not being met here. So again, how can I go back to the formula? How can I go back to there's an unmet need? How can I express what I'm feeling? Do so in a way that isn't judgmental, where I'm not making evaluations, and express what the need is. Because if I bite back and tell him he's an a-hole, if we're making a stupid joke in the security line, that's not going to get my needs met. I'm not going to be heard. So if I can reel it in and express what my needs are in a way that's compassionate, he's going to want to help me to get my needs met.
Okay. I feel like, how has it already been an hour? I'm so mad about it.
I'm sorry. We're done.
We could do like a whole seminar day. This was fantastic. And I know, Laura, you have 9 million questions. I mean, we have so many questions, but the conversation always just flows and it's so amazing.
Like, goes where it's supposed to go. And I feel like you guys gave real, tangible advice and tools that people can apply to their relationships every day.
I hope so.
Yeah, I hope so.
I hope so.
So wrapping it up, if we had 3 things, most of the listeners are going to be like listening to this on the way to work, in the car, maybe on a jog. 3 things. What would the top 3 things that we covered be the most significant from this conversation for leaving with something?
Which one of us is going first?
You always.
Well, okay. So
And then I'll try to think of something after you really nail it. Go.
be gentle.
Yeah.
Be gentle. When you have issues in your relationship, as every relationship does, try to be compassionate and gentle. And remember, do I want to be heard? Do I want to get my needs met? Because how I frame this is going to determine whether either of those things happen or not. So be gentle.
I think it goes with that. I'd say soft startup is super important, and just understanding that from a guy's perspective, that we armor up every day of the week, and we take barbs and insults from the guys that we work with, and when we come home, we take our armor off, and that puts us in a vulnerable position. So just sort of understanding that we trust you enough to take our armor off, and we don't expect sharp and sharp blades and harsh attacks, because we've dealt with that. And women have the same thing. But so I think I love the soft startup. And then my last one, I'll steal this from Sharla, but I think it's one we didn't cover, but I think it's repair early and often. And the minute if you step on it, just back up as fast as you can. And that's where our term, when we say that was a little sharp, I'll come in and it's like, hey, I need you to do this. And she'll say, oh, it's a little sharp. I'm like, you know what? All right. I apologize. I came in a little hot there. Let me just back up and let me try to say, this is what I need, right? It's not about you. It's about my needs. So I like the early and often repair. Just, realizing when you screw up, and the faster you can just backtrack and apologize and start over. And your spouse needs to give you the grace to allow you to start over.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll add one more thing that we didn't talk about that I think is important, and that's that you can be the greatest master of conflict. You can go to the best therapist in the world and learn how to do conflict effectively, and it still won't be enough for your relationship, because conflict alone is not enough. So if you think about, and I tell every couple this, that think of it almost like a balloon that maybe right now is built with inside it's blown up, and you have all of these like poor communication patterns, and you've been doing criticism and contempt and defensiveness, and you recognize some of these patterns in yourself. Yes, we can delete all those. We can blow that balloon out, but then there's just a void. So we have to blow that balloon back up and insert back in all of these positive affect systems, a lot of which we talked about on our last episode. So maybe go back and listen to that, but put back in friendship and put back in fun, excitement, play, intimacy, sex, all the fun things, because a relationship that's just void of conflict is just nothing. We have to put back in the other good stuff too.
All right.
Way to close. Good work. That was awesome.
That was
This was incredible.
A++++. So
that's because you guys are so fun.
Yeah. Oh, that was awesome.
this is amazing. And I'm so grateful that all of our listeners get to hear from you again. So can you remind people that might be wanting to work with you, can they, online? And what does that look like?
Yep. So most of our online one-on-one work is through Zoom. Most of our clients are not local. We also do retreats. We have courses. The best way to reach out or to stay in touch with us is either through the podcast, which is Master Your Marriage Podcast, or through any of the social channels. We're most active on Instagram, and that's Master Your Marriage on Instagram. So you can reach out to us, send us a DM there, or through the website, you can reach out to us as well.
Okay, great. Well, I just love having you two on. So
We love you.
Yeah.
I hope you have a great weekend. It's now Friday night at 5 p.m. So
Let's go party.
let's go party.
Thanks, Rich.
Thank you so much for joining, and we will talk to you soon.
Bye.
We want to thank you for sticking around here till the end. Our podcast has really grown over this past year, and it's because of you. We want to continue to provide each of you with value on a weekly basis.
And to do that, we just ask you to please support the show by leaving us a 5-star review and a comment.
More importantly, if there was someone in your life that is struggling in their relationship, please do us a favor by sharing this episode with them.
Remember to be kind to each other this week. Put each other first. It's the small things done often that make the greatest impact.
Until next time.